All right. Hey, everybody. This is Ivan. I made a post recently on X talking about my setup using a local model with two MacBook or a Mac Mini and a M1 Max machine, and it working pretty smoothly for the use cases of what I needed to do. To give people some more context, I actually have a M5 Max that I'm running most of my coding workload off of. And that one I am actually using Anthropic's Claude Code. It's been working well for me. But let's take a step back to how we even got to this point. I had an M4 Mac Mini that I was running just different agents on, doing things in the background, sort of like tasks that you could do and set up as cron jobs through Hermes agent. And I had it set up with Claude, right? I was using Sonnet and it was working quite well. But then we had the thing where Anthropic said, no, thank you. We're moving on. You have to use our own, Claude set of products with the APIs. You cannot use any third-party tools. So I said, fine. That's all good and well. Let me see what else we have going on. I went to the internet, went to X, and people had a couple of varying opinions, but I think the best one, once again, for my use case of doing pretty trivial task, was GLM, and specifically their Lite Claude or their Lite Pro plan, which I think they increased it. It was $10 when I have it, when I purchased it, I believe. But either way, it was $10 a month, and I was like, let's try this out, and it actually worked really well. I would say for most people who do not have a random M1 Max laying around with 64 gigs of RAM, you probably could just stick with this $10 a month and it will get you 99% of the way there. Well, for me, I decided I wanted to mess around with more things, and I did find out that I was trying to sell the M1 Max, and I was thinking, hey, if I can sell it for $1,000, that'd be great. But then I was thinking, well, if I have this machine here, I remember that there was a way to connect different machines together, especially with Apple Silicon. And so this led me to Exo. So ExoLabs, the way it works is you're able to connect, and you can see here, all these massive machines together. These are studios, of course. And then you can run these large frontier models like Minimax 2.7, maybe even the GLM 5.1, whatever it is that you want to run in that space, right? And I'm not even close to there. I am working with just, barely 50 something gigs of RAM on my Pro or on my MacBook, and then, no RAM on my Mac Mini, honestly, when it comes to, if I'm having other tools running other things like the browser and Discord and all this other stuff, which I'll show in a little bit. So for me, I decided to go down the path of using Exo, downloading everything. It was a pretty simple and easy setup. I'm happy to dive into that if you're interested. But one of the things that is, that I want to be clear about is I'm not using this feature, which is RDMA over Thunderport, which is only supported for some of the newer models with Thunderbolt 5 support. I'm just going straight through TCP IP, and you can sort of see that here with, I think you can see it with integrations, if I remember. Well, I'm not sure exactly where that is, but essentially I'm not going through, this, oh, there it is. RDMA is not enabled. They're not connected right now, which means it's a little bit slower, which is fine for me. It works all the same, and I get to run my, cron jobs, my scheduled tasks at night like I usually do. So let's go into a little bit more about, what my setup is right now. So we talked about the hardware aspect. I have a MacBook M1 with 64 gigs, and then I have the Mac Mini that is actually running most of the workload and running Hermes agent and everything else. It talks to my MacBook when it needs the model, which I am running Qwen 3.5 on. I am very interested in 3.6, which is something I'll follow up on. If people are interested, I'm going to do some testing and see how that goes. And then I have Hermes agent set up with my Discord. And so you can see here, It's running things. I have a cron job that goes through and checks some of my repos and does some deslopify stuff, making sure it's clean. I have a health check, things like that. And now I want to get into like what is good for this setup and what is not. So just keep in mind that we are pretty limited still. You know, like these open source models are incredible given the hardware constraints that you may have. Not everyone is walking around with, if we go back to Exo, 4 massive, M3 528 gigs of RAM studios, right? Like if you have this, good. Like by all means, get the best stuff in, and you're probably running, and it's probably incredibly fast for you. You're basically building like a mini LLM like data server in your home, which is great. But I think for most of us, we don't have those kind of resources. So being able to take a step back and use some of the smaller resources that we have, like this M1 Max that I have, and run things on it is actually pretty incredible. But you are limited in what you can do. You're not hitting, Opus level coding like that. I still, like I said, with my M5 MacBook, that is what I'm using for most of it. But you can do quite a bit of cool things, I think, still. So in my cron job, I'm doing a couple of things, and you can sort of see here. I have just a health check. I have a daily market briefing, so it goes and just checks the market and sends me a little summary into this Discord channel every morning in the business day. A bunch of nightly health stuff. One of the other things that I use is for AI LLM, like daily buzz. So like, what is going on in the Reddit world? What is going on in the X world? What are some new things so I can keep, try to keep up with all the crazy changing things and innovations that are happening. And then the other thing that I use this for is like a keyword ranking, which are a couple apps I've created with my brother. And so I have them ranked, and I always check to see how they're doing, and they'll pop up here. The limitations I've noticed are, like I said, some of the vibe coding pieces, and some of the longer running. For example, I was trying to benchmark Qwen against itself through Hermes agent and see how good it got at tool calling, and it's still working through it. So there are some limitations here, and I don't think you can get away from that until that improves over time as these models get better and better. But that's something to do, right? That's something to look forward to. The other things I'm looking forward to is seeing if perhaps the next set of models are going to be good enough for vibe coding, and then fully switching to that. That's one thing. The other thing that is more important maybe in this context is setting up my connection so that it's not going through TCP/IP, but a direct connection. And there's been some discussions about using an Ethernet port. There's been some discussions where you can actually just set up with, the Thunderbolt 4, which is on the MacBook, to the Mac Mini, which is Thunderbolt 5, but it's backwards compatible, so that you can still get just much higher bandwidth in terms of the data transfer between these two devices. So yeah, this is my setup. Some of the things that I thought about in terms of what I'm using it for and what I think it's pretty good at. And, I'm excited for what's to come in the future with, like I said, the evolution of models, the evolution of these tools that you can combine, smaller maybe devices with, and go from there. If you're interested in more on this, let me know. If there's certain things that you felt like I need to dig into that you're interested in, happy to do that as well. But a huge shout out to Exo, Hermes Agent, all these amazing open source projects. I think they're open source. The projects that are just making life so much cooler and easier. So thanks for you guys, and thanks for watching.